Wyoming's best adventure starts in Wind River Country, located in western Wyoming, just beyond Yellowstone National Park and the Grand Teton Mountains. Wind River Country is the place to go to get away from the crowds, unplug, unwind, and find room to roam. Wyoming's Wind River Country, Yellowstone's unique neighbor.
Hey, thanks for being here with us. It's Shireen Herrera. We are here for a haunted history tour. It's a spooky night in October, and we have Alma Law, who is our haunted historian. We've featured Alma in past podcasts, and on this episode, Alma will take us on a haunted history tour of Lander.
I'm Alma Law. I have been doing these haunted history tours of Riverton for over 9 years. I started them because ghost stories are really cool. Here we are, Centennial Park. It used to be a building. It used to be a few different buildings. It used to be Palace Pharmacy. Palace Pharmacy was here. I don't know how many fires destroyed parts of Lander, but this was one of them. Palace Pharmacy stopped and became Lanigan's Saloon. Edward Lanigan of Ireland had his saloon, and his famous story was that Butch Cassidy loved to drink at his saloon. So Butch Cassidy would show up. He had a special, like everybody hitched their horses in front, but Butch Cassidy had a special post in back, and he would come in the back door and drink and have fun and made friends with everybody. Loved Ed Lanigan. And the famous story is Lanigan saw like the sheriff come towards his bar and ran over and told Butch Cassidy, and Butch Cassidy headed out the back, jumped on his horse and was gone. And the sheriff came in looking for him, and everybody's like, we didn't see him. So he covered for Butch Cassidy's escape. Way over there, you see the big tall building above everything, that's the mill. It really did start as a flour mill. All of the farmers that were growing in this area and wanting to be viable and wanting to make their impact on the world, Lander always had big plans, big dreams. They started a flour mill for the farmers of grains. And because of the flour mill, Lander was the second city in Wyoming to have electricity, to be hooked up as a city with electricity. They imported a bunch of coal from Hudson area. They had a big coal burner. They started their electric generator, and so that they could power this grain mill for flour. Let's jump around a little bit. This corner across, there's Wild Iris, and there's this Power Sports. That whole section was 3 different buildings. There was the newspaper office. There was Lander Cigar Company. A guy out of Sheridan who was already doing a pretty good job decided to come to Lander and do his thing. He was importing Cuban tobacco and wrapping it himself, and he would sell these Cuban Lander cigars. And it got to be a pretty big deal. It got rather successful. Hudson had its own Hudson Cigar Company. Riverton didn't. So there's the Lander Cigar Company and the Stagecoach Stop, which is very important in the world of Lander. The Stagecoach Stop was one of the 3 buildings, and 2 of those buildings are now in the Pioneer Village at the museum. The Stagecoach Stop, it would cost $5.50 to take a whole day and ride the stagecoach to Shoshone. Until 1906, when the Chicago-Burlington rail lines hooked up through Riverton. That's why Shoshone became a thing. That's why Riverton became a thing. It's because the railroad had to stop every 30 miles, which is why every 30 miles across Wyoming you find a town, because stagecoach and then railroad had to stop every 30 miles. Across the street, though, you see that big red building behind Loaf and Jug? That was Hans Livery and Stable. He had this great idea. He was a rancher. He did some other things, and he was like, you know what Lander's still missing is a good stable. So he built a stable, and it was a stable for a long time. A friend of mine said, because here's my question. I'm not from Lander. I need to know more business owners in Lander. Do you know anybody who had or does have a business on Lander Main Street that could tell me ghost stories? She's like, let me think about it. And she said, yes, let me introduce you to my friend. So her friend, she owned a nail salon in that building that's been closed for a while, had it for 11 years, and she said it was messed up. Haunted. Translate. It was messed up. So she said, for 11 years, I just knew anytime I was in that building, I wasn't alone. And that phrase comes up 4 times in the interview we had. So she said, my sister and I first started out, she was my financial partner, and she was going to run this mercantile gift shop, and I had my nail salon. And after the first couple of weeks where we moved in, she stopped coming with me. And I was like, I need your help. And she's, I'm not going back in that building. When I'm in that building, I'm not alone. So her financial stake is in this building and she won't even touch anymore. Haunted, right? Whew, end of story. No, there's a couple more parts of that story. But there's one night, end of the night, She wraps up her stuff. Her last customer has gone. She goes into the back to use the restroom, leaves the door open. There's the back of the business and a bathroom with a back hallway that connects it with the rest of the building. She goes to the bathroom and comes back, and the door is shut and it's locked. And you have to lock it with a key. Her keys are on her desk. Her phone is on her desk. She's in this no man's land transfer domain trying to open the door. But in the meantime, she hears stuff happening on the other side of the door. She hears ruckus. The ghost got grumpy. So she's banging on it. She's rattling it. She can't call anybody. She's frustrated, like she's just about to lose her cool. And there's a click. And she opens the door. Easy, because it's not a hard door unless it's locked. And she goes into her office, and someone cleared off her desk, and it's scattered all over. A couple things are broken. She goes into the retail section, and her shelves have been cleared and things are thrown across the room from where they were. Things are broken all over the floor, and she gets pissed off. She tells her husband, "You are coming into work with me tomorrow." And he's like, "No, I'm busy." And she's like, "You're coming into work and you're helping me with a couple of things." I'm like, "Why?" And she said, "Because when I'm in that building, I'm not alone." So she brings her husband. She sends him up the stairs. Upstairs, he's supposed to do some things. There's a pool table upstairs, by the way. I didn't know that. He sees the pool table, and he's a guy, and he just sets the balls, puts them in the triangle, racks them, and then hangs the triangle up and walks back. But he's got the heebie-jeebies. So he comes down, and "Oh, it's so weird up there. Like, when I was up there, I wasn't alone. Specifically, I wasn't alone." Not that he heard something. Anyway, bam, crack. You hear all the pool balls like shatter across the table. And both of them are just like, "Whoa, what was that?" He's like, "I racked the pool balls." So he goes back up there, and they're looking around, and he's doing his guy thing. He just racks them again. They're walking down the stairs. Crack! They all fly across the table again and smack each other. And you know how that sounds. So we're about to go on a walk. So let's walk around the block a little bit. We're going to go back towards the alley and walk around the other side. Just so you know, this big, beautiful building with the murals, which is the Lander Bake Shop, it was the first Grand Theater. And so the ceilings are really high like a theater, but then the Grand Theater moved across the street. So we can see that as we walk down the alley towards the other side. We're walking down the alley. We're going to turn the corner up here, but we'll be off Main Street so I can tell you about the bank, the new bank. The new bank is so cool because of what it used to be. Okay, we'll stop right here. We're going to talk about this bank right here. Because it's new, because it doesn't match any. Oh, by the way, like Lander Cigar Shop is a thing, but so is Lander Brick Factory. Lander made their own bricks. They squeezed their own dirt into bricks, and the oldest buildings were made by Lander bricks. In fact, 1870s, the guy's name is like Sheehan or something, but he built the Fremont Hotel, and it was a big, beautiful, one of the nicest hotels around. It was 2 stories until 1906. What happened in 1906? The railroad. So the railroad came here, and all these people are like, okay, now is the time to grow. The Sheehan guy put 2 more floors on the Fremont Hotel, and it was the first in Wyoming 4-story building. All of Wyoming, Lander had the first 4-story building. It stayed the first for a while. Let's walk. Pop quiz. Somebody tell me something about this building. What is it? It's the Noble Hotel. What do they use it for now? They still call it Knowles, like the students who come in from all over and do their outdoor experiences. They live on the 2 floors, mostly the 2nd floor, the 3rd floor. They say, don't go up on the 3rd floor. That's reserved for staff. Or they also say that's where it's haunted. And they're like ribbing each other and saying, we told them it was haunted. It is. Like the 3rd floor freaks people out because of real things. Fred Noble owned this property. Something burned down on it, but he wanted to do something with it, and he was approached by H-Bar something. He was approached, and they said, let's do this thing. The railroad's coming to town, I've heard. We should make another hotel. Let's make it fancy and big. And Fred Noble is like, yes. Use this land. Here is the material supply, lumber. Here's like my share of the brick, my brick share of the Lander Brick Company that I've invested in. Here's the stuff. Build this nice hotel. So they built it. And he said, Colin, could you please name it Noble? Because this is really sweet, guys. Because my son died and I want something to carry my name after I die. So they called it the Noble Hotel because he was going to pass on his name, but then he had to change plans. So it was a beautiful restaurant on the 1st floor, like resort hotel. Here's what they did. They had this package. When you get off the train in Lander, You pay for this package and get 2 days of full glamour of all of that Lander has to offer. Then you get on those big yellow tour buses and they will drive you to Yellowstone, give you a big tour of Yellowstone, come back, rest for 2 days again, then you can get back on the train. So they had a thing. It was so cool. They had a huge fish tank, a big, huge fish tank in the Noble Hotel back then for the restaurant. And anybody who came and got the package for the Noble Hotel got to point at the fish they want for dinner. Like, I want that trout. And so they'd pull it out and kind of like lobsters, but not, it's trout. But we're in Wyoming, what do you want? Then, this is the story that I did here because last year Bookmarked Literary Arts Festival did our book fair in that room over there. And so I got to come in and say, this is very nice, thank you very much, lovely. Is it haunted? As a matter of fact, it is. Tell me more. So this is what he told me last year when Bookmarked used it. He said, the story goes that a few years ago we had a nurse and she had her office right here and she was ready, but the students were really downsized and there wasn't much going on. So she's in her office doing her stuff, nursey things, and she hears this hacking, this nasty coughing, really deep. Oh boy, that's something, that's really going at it. She hears it go on for a while. She gets really concerned, but she's obviously it doesn't sound like they're fainting. Obviously, they're going to come to me soon. I don't know where they are, but they know this is the nurse's office. So they're going to come and I'm just waiting to help whoever's coughing a lung up. They never did. So it's still going on. She leaves her office and follows the sound of this coughing and follows it to this door and opens the door and the room is empty and this coughing stops. After a little bit of historical research, the only thing they can figure is the partner of Noble, that's why I should have remembered his name, the partner of Noble, H.R. something, his wife died of tuberculosis, who had many coughing fits before stopping the coughing fits suddenly. Okay, so just cross the alley and be right straight in front of the big white building. So this is the Hudson building. It's where CES is housed in Lander. And they built it, they started in 1910, they finished it in 1912. It was because Lander was a county seat. The first floor was all the post office. In back, they actually had hitching posts for the mail carriers and the mail wagons, the teams that would drive the wagons. They would park in back. And the first floor was all post office. The second floor was all federal court. I was asking the lady behind the counter, he wants to know if it's haunted. She didn't ask the ghost, she asked her coworkers. Wouldn't that be funny? Hey, ghost, give him a show. No, she asked her coworkers, yes, it's boy. I haven't heard I haven't seen anything, but yes. The director walked past and she said, oh, would you like a tour? He can give you a tour. So he gave me a tour and we went downstairs and opened up all the doors in the basement, opened up this big vault door with this big open, really thick brick room. I have this really silly ghost app on my phone. I don't know what to think about it, but I was new and I turned it on and I'm walking through this and I'm just hey, I don't know that this is doing anything, but let's see how it works. And so we're walking through, he's opening these doors. The basement, there's a YouTube video where Randy Wise at the museum talks about Lander and he says, and the basement was really well done and they had these huge staff bathrooms for the post office. And so I walk into the bathroom and I'm ghost detecting, green bars pop up a little bit. And then all of a sudden I walk in the bathroom, ding, 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 ding. It turns red bars all the way up at the top and it says, shoo, shoo. What does that mean? I don't know. Shoo. Okay, so we walk out of the bathrooms. It was cool bathrooms. And we open those big double doors that have a little bar that locks them together. And we walked into there and it starts getting higher and crackling louder. And it says, help. But it was really cool. So I went up to the second floor and he gave me a big tour and he did say, when a couple of us managers are here alone at night, when we hear each other clacking away at our keyboards, these are old keyboards, not new ones, the old clacky keyboards, he said, and the two of us will hear someone walk up the stairs and walk down the hall and stomp all the way down this long hallway between the courtroom and the holding room, open some doors and just move. And he said, it doesn't feel bad, but it's weird. And then sometimes it walks back and we're just you heard that, right? Yeah, I heard that. Me too. But this is the federal building. It's now, just for your information, it's now the Hudson CES. It's in Lander. Okay, we'll stop right here. That one of those buildings on this side of the Grand Theater was a bar that was run by ex-sheriff, former Sheriff Gristle, and it was called the Arcade Saloon, and there's some cool stuff. And there was another bar next to it that was called it's hard to tell because the stories all lump them together, but the Knights of Pythias. Knights of Pythias, when Abraham Lincoln was right at the end of the Civil War, he told Congress, I want Knights of Pythias everywhere. So it was the first brotherhood organization that was approved by U.S. Congress to be spread throughout the country. Officially, governmentally, federal level, Gristle owned the Arcade Saloon. He also changed the name and owned that one too. But at the Arcade Saloon, he was famous for having the noose, yes, noose, that had hung the only legally executed capital punishment murderer in Lander. Executed legally, right? You got that part. The only guy who was executed legally by hanging, his noose was hanging at the Arcade Saloon for a long time. Now the noose is at the Lander Museum. You can find that noose. So I just saw Gristle had this thing, and it was the one who hung this dude named James Kiefer. Okay, that's all I knew. 1901, James Kiefer killed a guy named, according to the newspaper, and it's important to say that, according to the newspaper, James Kiefer killed a guy named J.C. Warren in 1901. That was the noose that killed James Kiefer in the saloon. 1903, there's this big lawsuit where Lander courts, 1903, so it wasn't this one yet, it was still the courthouse, which was back then, he was sentenced to death by the Lander courts. But it's like a district court. It's a smaller regional territorial government judge, right? And so the question arises, do they have authority to sentence people to death? So the lawyer, James Kiefer, said, we've got extenuating circumstances. He is crazy. We're going to appeal to a higher court. So the Wyoming official Supreme Court says, yep, kill him. They were right on that one. And so I looked through all the newspapers. In August of 1903 is when they send the appeal, and the Wyoming Judicial Court says, nope, he's dead. The sheriff, the newspaper article says, the sheriff is down in Rawlins today trying to borrow their scaffolding for a gallows because we don't have that here. So he's just going to see if Rawlins will lend it out. A couple weeks later, nope, Rawlins didn't. Lander is looking to construct their own, but they've done this breakthrough engineered scaffold. Isn't that great? The engineering genius of Lander. They created the scaffold where it was self-executing. James Kiefer was like, the famous noose was placed around his neck, and he just had to step forward of his own volition. And when he stepped on the pressurized platform, it would pull a cork out of the big tub of water. And as the water got low enough, the counterweight would drop and he would die by hanging. But nobody had to go to bed with a horrible conscience because it hurts to kill someone. So this was like, nobody in town had to be the executioner and have a hard time living with themselves. But James Kiefer was a rough guy. I haven't even told you what he did. For killing J.C. Warren, for killing John Warren, for William Warren. William, where'd that come from? J.C. Warren, okay. John Warren, J could stand for John. William Warren. So every newspaper article said a different name of the guy he killed, but it was all Warren. He was a quiet guy. Everybody liked him. Warren was unassuming. He was just an older gentleman in town. The newspaper did not say why he killed. They didn't report the murder itself. They just said, this guy's going to die for a thing he did 2 years ago. So the coroner report said James Kiefer was found days after Warren was killed in his bed sleeping by a double-barreled shotgun at close range. And his money was gone. A few days later, James Kiefer, who's a local crazy guy, has money. And they're like, where'd you get this money? Is this money from Warren? I don't remember. So they arrested him and researched it, and the money was from Warren, and they pieced the story together. And he really did have a rather major brain injury a few years before and did not remember that he killed J.C. Warren at point-blank range with a shotgun while he was in bed. But the bar that had the noose displayed was one of these two. We'll walk along this. You will know as we pass the back of Grand Theater that one of the apartments above the theater, I like old murder. This isn't even a murder thing, but I like old death. I like old ghosts. I don't like new things. It's almost too personal. But there's a room that is set up exactly like the mother who died in it and hasn't been touched since she died. And it's all locked away and nobody's entered it. So it's like an homage to the theater owner who's recognizing that's where his mom lived for a while. We'll walk down this alleyway because I was going to tell you about Pythias, remember? Keep that in your head, Pythias. The Knights of Pythias. There's the grand. I was going to tell you more about Pythias, remember? And then we'll turn the corner and go back to Centennial Park and everybody's good. I'll give you the time off for good behavior. Pythias, Knights of Pythias. I shouted behind you that Abraham Lincoln established that Congress sanctioned officially the Knights of Pythias as the order that everybody should be part of. The Knights of Pythias, it's based out of Greek mythology. Some guy read this thing of Greek mythology and said, man, that is what we need. So he created Knights of Pythias, and Abraham Lincoln liked it, and they sanctioned it officially, the first only real brotherhood organization that the U.S. government said, bring this everywhere. The Knights of Pythias. And so the building that Gristle had his bar in was owned by the Knights of Pythias. And what else happened with the Knights of Pythias is the second mayor, Winfield, he joined the Knights of Pythias and he left like city council and mayordom when he did that. And the Knights of Pythias, it is for people who believe in a higher power. It does not, by design, dictate what that has to look like. Somebody who is a believer who wants to do well for their fellow man. That's the ground rules. Believe in God to help people. So this guy Winfield joined it. He was sent here from Rollins because he was a cabinet maker. Guess what cabinet makers also did back then? Coffins, undertaking. They were morticians. They were undertakers. They built coffins. They did carpentry for cabinets, furniture, and your last piece of furniture you'll ever need. He came here with his partner who was still in Rollins. His partner said, go dazzle him with how good you do furniture. He was the mortician. After he did a big job for the new courthouse, the old courthouse that was new back then. He did a big job for them. He got paid off for all the furniture he filled the courthouse with, all the woodwork he did in there, which is beautiful. He used that money and paid off his partner and then was independent in his business dealings in Lander. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for breaking out of how awkward it is to be in public with people, but like you're here and it's been great. Thank you for investing in the history of your town and also the history of people getting together for oral entertainment. Have you ever heard that people got together for speakers and you'd be like, how lame would that be? Sometimes it's not. Sometimes vocal storytelling could be rather entertaining. And I'm glad that you showed up and let it be entertainment for tonight.
Thanks for tuning in to Wyoming's Wind River Country, Yellowstone's unique neighbor. Visit us at windriver.org and follow Wyoming's Wind River Country on Facebook and Instagram. This podcast has been brought to you by the Wind River Visitors Council.